Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. They thought your silence meant weakness. They believed that if they ignored you long enough, you'd come crawling back. They thought you needed them more. Then they needed you. But the moment you turned your back, the moment you stopped reacting, that's when the walls started to crack. Nothing haunts a person more than the one who walked away and never looked back. If you've ever been in that position, always the one caring more, giving more, and showing up while they barely noticed, you're not alone, my friends. But today, that changes. Today, we're flipping the script. So before we dive deep, hit that like button, subscribe, and join this space where we break illusions, reclaim power, and walk the path of resilience with strength. You're not here by accident. You're here because something inside you is done settling. This is where it all begins. Now imagine this for a second. You're a sun, bright, warm, life-giving. Every day you rise without fail. You light up their world, shining even when they don't look up to notice. They get used to it. Your light becomes routine, and they start taking you for granted, until one day you stop rising for them. You vanish, and suddenly their world turns cold. That warmth they ignored is now the only thing they crave. That's what happens when you ignore someone, not to hurt them, not to play games, but to protect your peace, because silence isn't passive, it's power. It's a message written in invisible ink. I don't owe you my energy anymore. People don't realize how loud your absence is until you're gone. They think you not responding means you're bitter, that you're waiting for them to reach out. No, what they don't see is that you've moved on. You're not bitter, you're better. You're not waiting, you're working. You're not crying, you're climbing. Let me break the biggest lie society ever sold you. If you care, you have to prove it. No, my friend. If someone truly values you, you won't have to perform for love, beg for attention, or fight to stay relevant. Love doesn't look like chasing someone who doesn't look back. That's not loyalty, that's self-destruction dressed up as devotion. So when you go silent, when you walk away, you're not giving up, you're waking up. You're waking up, you're realizing your energy is gold, and you've been handing it out like spare change to people who never earned it. Think of it like this. Ever tried to read a book while someone blasts music in the background? You can't focus, right? But the moment the noise stops, clarity rushes in. That's your silence. You've been the background music in their life for too long, constant, predictable. But now that the sound is gone, they can't stop noticing what's missing. You were never invisible. You were just too present. Let me tell you something important. When you stop overgiving, when you reclaim your time, your peace, your attention, you become the mystery. And people don't forget mysteries. They obsess over them. They'll check their phone, wondering why it hasn't buzzed. They'll scroll through your socials, trying to read between the lines. They'll stare at your silence like it's a puzzle they can't solve. And that, my friends, is when their world starts falling apart because they didn't expect the version of you who doesn't explain, who doesn't chase, who doesn't wait. So say this with me: my silence is power. Write it in the comments right now. Let that truth sit in your bone. Let the world know you're done being easy to reach. Trust me, if you think this shift is powerful, stay with me. It's about to get even better. Number 1, the power of absence. You were the flame, now you're the smoke. The flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long. You burned for them, didn't you? Bright, warm, unwavering. You lit up their world even when yours was falling apart. You showed up every time, replied instantly, cared deeply, loved fully. You were the fire they sat beside when the world got cold. But what did they do? They got used to the warmth. They stopped appreciating the light. When a flame gets taken for granted long enough, it starts to flicker. Then one day it's gone. That's when they notice. Hey. You were the candle that filled the room, the kind that made everything feel softer, better, safer. But now the flame is out and you're no longer there. Your presence lingers in the form of memories, silence, and that gut-wrenching feeling they can't quite explain. That, my friends, is the power of absence. They don't see you anymore, but they smell the smoke. Now their world feels colder than it used to. Not because you said something, not because you lashed out, but because you're simply not there. That's what hits the hardest. Maybe right now you're wondering, but if I disappear, won't they forget me? What if they replace me? What if I fade away and they don't even notice I'm gone? Ah, that fear. That little voice that whispers, you have to stay visible to be valuable. Let me tell you something, folks. That voice is lying to you. It's scared. It's been conditioned to believe your presence is your only proof of worth, that if you're not showing up, they'll move on. But here's the truth. People remember impact, not noise. A firecracker is loud, flashy, and quick, but a wildfire spreads without a sound. It stays, it consumes, it leaves a mark. And you were never a spark. You were a slow-burning fire that gave and gave until you had nothing left. But now that you've gone quiet, they'll feel the chill, the silence, the weight of what they lost, even if they never said it out loud. Let me break another lie wide open. If they really cared, they wouldn't need to lose you to realize it. But it's not how people work. Most don't notice the sun until it stops rising. They don't realize how good they had it until it's not there anymore. They don't value consistency because they assume it'll always be there. And you were always there. That's what they counted on. That's what made them blind to your worth. But the moment you vanish, it's like someone flipped off the power. The room goes dark. They bump into the walls, reach out, and grasp at nothing. Suddenly, all that light they took for granted becomes the thing they crave the most. Here's the part that's going to hit hard. They won't admit it. They might act unfazed, post like they're living their best life, laugh a little louder, smile a little wider, but inside, it's chaos. They're scrolling, checking, waiting for a sign that you still care. Deep down, they know your absence isn't quiet. It's screaming. But I get it. Walking away isn't easy, especially when you've tied so much of your identity to being the one who always shows up. Being available became your default. You wore it like a badge. Look how loyal I am. Look how much I care. But let me ask you, where did that loyalty get you? Exhausted, ignored, taken for granted. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop. Stop showing up. Stop explaining. Stop making it easy for people to access your light without ever earning it. I know this kind of detachment feels unnatural, like you're betraying who you are. But you're not betraying anyone. You're protecting the very best parts of yourself from people who only knew how to take. Silence doesn't mean you stopped loving. It means you started healing. It means you chose peace over performance. It means you finally understood that your time, your energy, your presence, they're sacred. You're not ghosting them. You're grieving what you gave and never got back. You're not playing games. You're refusing to keep losing yourself to someone who never noticed you were right in front of them. You're not punishing them, you're liberating yourself. Think of it like this. You've been the music in the background of their life, always playing, always there. They tuned you out, but now that the music stopped, the silence is deafening. You don't need to be petty. You don't need to make an announcement. The quiet will speak for you. The scent of that burnt-out flame will linger in their mind every time they pass a place you once were, hear a song you once loved, or see someone who reminds them of the smile you used to give for free. They'll start realizing you weren't just another light. You were the fire, the warmth, the source, and now they're cold. So say this with me: I don't need to be seen to be felt. Write it in the comments. Show yourself. Show the world. Let them all know your absence is not weakness. It's power in motion. Trust me, my friends, if you think the silence is loud now, stay with me, because what's coming next will shake everything they thought they knew about you. Number 2, silence is a mirror, and let them face themselves. Sometimes silence is the most piercing scream. Want to know what happens when you go quiet? When you stop replying, stop explaining, stop showing up with that soft heart, hoping they'll finally see your worth. They are left with something they were never ready to face: themselves. Let me tell you something, my friends. Most people can't handle that. Your silence isn't just the absence of your words. It's a mirror. A cold, clear reflection of who they really are without your energy propping them up. And what they see haunts them. While you were there, texting first, making plans, checking in, they had someone to distract them from their own emptiness, someone to lean on, someone to blame, someone to bounce their dysfunction off of. But the moment you stop responding, the noise dies down. The chaos fades, and suddenly they're in a room alone with their own thoughts. It's like being in a loud room where you can't hear yourself think until the music stops. Nay, until the music stops. And now they can hear everything. Their guilt, their regret, the lies they told themselves to feel better about how they treated you, the excuses, the games, the ego. Your silence forces a confrontation they never signed up for. Trust me, they're not sitting there thinking, "Oh wow, I handled everything so perfectly." No, that voice in their head starts whispering, "Did I push them away? Were they actually right? Why do I feel this pit in my chest?" Because when you go quiet, they're no longer reacting to you. They're reacting to their own reflection. For some people, that's the scariest thing in the world. People run from accountability like it's fire, but your silence, that's the burn. I know what you might be thinking. But if I stay quiet, won't they just forget about me? What if they move on? What if they don't feel anything at all? Let me hit you with the truth. If they could forget you that easily, they were never really connected to you in the first place. If they move on like nothing happened, they were only using your presence as a distraction from their own emptiness. And if they feel nothing, that silence, that space you created, it's still teaching you everything you need to know. Because silence isn't just about cutting them off. It's about cutting through the noise. It's about clarity, for you and for them. They can't gaslight silence. They can't twist your words if you don't offer any. They can't play the victim when there's no drama to feed on. Without you handing them emotional responses on a silver platter, they've got nothing but their own conscience to chew on. And yeah, it'll bother them. They'll squirm, overthink, check your page, reread old messages, trying to find meaning in your stillness, Not because you're being petty, not because you're playing games, but because for once they're seeing how loud your presence really was now that it's gone. Here's the beauty of it all. You don't need to argue. You don't need to convince. You don't need to defend your side. Your silence already said everything. Yes, this isn't easy, staying silent when you've been misunderstood. That's hard. Not correcting the lies, even harder. But sometimes peace looks like walking away and letting them figure it out without you. Let them face their own mirror. Let them sit with the consequences of their actions. Let them wonder. Because silence is not the absence of communication, it's the loudest form of it. It says, I'm not playing this game anymore. It says, you're not worth my peace. It says, I've said all I needed to say, and now you get to face the echo. So say this with me. My silence is my clarity. Write it in the comments. Show yourself. Show the world. Let them all know you don't chase closure. You become it. Trust me, my friends. If you thought silence was powerful, stay with me, because what's coming next, that's when they really start to feel the loss. Number 3, you were the source. Now they're thirsty for what's gone. People only love you when your love is useful. They were never thirsty until you stopped pouring. You were the source, my friends. The well they kept coming back to. The stream that ran steady no matter how many times they dipped their hands in. Your love flowed freely. Your time was always available. Your energy was given without question. And because it never stopped, they assumed it never would. They drank from you like you'd never run dry. But now that you've pulled back, now that the well is empty, they're thirsty. And for the first time, they feel it. You see, that's the tragedy of being the giver in a world full of takers. You give so much so often, with such consistency that people start thinking you're supposed to, that your kindness is on tap, that your love has no limits, that your presence doesn't cost you anything. But it does. It always did. You just never charged them. Imagine a quiet little stream in the middle of the woods. Birds drink from it, deer gather. People stumble upon it on long walks and wash their hands in its cool water. Every time someone finds it, they think, how lucky am I to have found this? But the next day, they bring friends. The next week, they come back. They build around it. They take. They use until one day it's gone, dried up. Nothing left but dirt and stone. Suddenly, they panic. Where's the stream? Why did it stop? I need it. That's you. You weren't just giving love. You were sustaining them. You weren't just offering support. You were their foundation. But because you never asked for anything in return, they started believing you needed nothing, that you didn't get tired, that you didn't hurt, that you didn't notice how empty you were becoming just to keep them full. But now that the stream is gone, now that the source has disappeared, they don't just miss you, they need you. But they no longer have access. Here's the twist: they'll act confused. They'll pretend they don't know why you went cold, why you stopped texting, why you don't smile the same anymore. But deep down, they know. They remember the ignored messages, the cancelled plans, the one-sided conversations, the times they didn't ask how you were, only what you could do for them. They remember it all. They just hoped you'd forget. But you didn't forget. You learn. You learn that love without boundaries becomes exhaustion, that availability without appreciation becomes resentment, that giving without limits turns you into the empty one. And now you're doing the one thing they never expected. You've shut off the flow. You've become unavailable, not to punish them, but to protect yourself. You finally realized something powerful. You are not a resource. You are a person. You are not here to be used, drained, or consumed without care. You are not a vending machine for affection. You're not a faucet for their emotional thirst. You're the well, the source, the one they should have cherished, the one they thought would never leave. Yes, stepping back hurts at first because deep down, you hoped they'd wake up before it came to this. You hoped they'd see your worth while you were still offering it. You hoped they'd treat you better without you having to walk away. They didn't, and now they're learning the hard way, access denied. Don't be surprised when they come crawling back. When they say things like, "You've changed. You're cold now. What happened to you?" Here's what happened. You finally saw the truth. You saw that being the source doesn't mean you have to be endlessly available. That being kind doesn't mean being used. That being giving doesn't mean being taken for granted. You didn't change. You remembered who you were before they made you forget. So say this with me: I am not a resource for people who drain me. Write it in the comments. Let it echo. Let it burn through the lies you were taught. Show yourself. Show the world. Let them all know you've closed the tap. The source has moved, and now you protect what flows from you. Trust me, my friends. If you think they're thirsty now, stay with me, because what's coming next, well, they'll realize the stream they lost was the only one that ever truly cared. Number 4, they controlled the game until you stopped playing. He who angers you conquers you. They thought they had you figured out. Every time they pulled away, you chased. Every time they ignored you, you reached out. Every time they gave the bare minimum, you gave your everything. It was a game. And whether you realized it or not, you were playing it. Not because you wanted to, but because you thought that's what love looked like. You thought, if I just try harder, maybe they'll finally choose me. But let me tell you, my friends, they weren't confused. They were in control. The game, it wasn't love. It was power. It was about keeping you hooked just enough to stay, but never enough to feel secure. It was about seeing how little they could give while still keeping you emotionally invested. You were the one moving piece on the board while they sat back, confident you'd never walk away. But then you did. You got quiet. You stopped explaining. You stopped reacting. You stopped trying to fix what they were intentionally breaking. You stopped playing. And just like that, the entire game collapsed. Here's the truth. They never expected you to stop. They never thought the one who always reached out would stop calling. They never thought the one who always forgave would finally walk away. They never thought the most loyal piece on the board would leave the board entirely. Now they feel powerless, not because they lost a game, but because they lost the person who kept it going. Imagine a chess match. They held the pieces, the queen, the rook, the knight, strategy, control, manipulation, and you were the pawn. But you were the pawn who kept moving, kept showing up, kept giving them room to win. What happens when the pawn just stands still? When it stops playing, the board freezes. The power shift is instant, because the player who had all the control now has nothing to move. You weren't weak, you were essential, and they knew it. That's why they tested you. That's why they created distance. That's why they kept you guessing. Because your reaction gave them power. Your need for answers fed their ego. Your desperation kept the game alive. But the moment you chose peace over participation, that was your power move, the kind that doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. You simply stopped showing up to be toyed with. Now they're scrambling. When you were reacting, They felt powerful. But your silence, your stillness, that's a different kind of threat. It says, I don't need to prove anything anymore. It says, I'm no longer playing by rules that were never fair to begin with. I know what you might be thinking. But if I stop playing, won't they move on to someone else? What if I walk away and they never come back? What if I'm just giving up too soon? No, my friend, you're not giving up. You're waking up. You're realizing that love shouldn't be a battlefield, that real connection doesn't require you to sacrifice your peace to prove your worth. If someone only loved you when you were losing yourself, that was never love. That was control. The moment you stop responding to the bait, you stop being bait. You become untouchable. This shift is uncomfortable because you've been trained to equate love with effort. But sometimes the greatest form of effort is restraint, the strength to not reply, the strength to not chase, the strength to walk away from a game you were never meant to win. You don't win by outplaying them. You win by refusing to play at all. Now, they feel it. The silence, the shift, the missing energy. The one person who kept the dynamic alive is no longer playing along. Whether they show it or not, they're shaken because the one they underestimated just flipped the entire board over. So say this with me. I control the game by refusing to play it. Write it in the comments. Show yourself. Show the world. Let it be known that you're no longer available for emotional games, for manipulation, for one-sided chasing. You stepped out of the game and stepped into your power. Trust me, my friends, if they thought your silence was powerful, stay with me. What happens next? That's when they realize you were the only piece that ever truly mattered. Number 5, ego death. They're not mad, they're losing control. Some people aren't angry because they lost you. They're angry because they can no longer control you. Let's call it what it really is, ego death. They're not mad because they miss you. They're mad because the strings they once used to pull you in any direction they pleased have snapped. You're no longer dancing for their attention. You're no longer jumping at every breadcrumb, every half-hearted apology, every I miss you that never came with change. That silence, that detachment, it hits them harder than anything you could have said. For people like this, it was never about love. It was about control. It was about being the one who always had the upper hand. They didn't need you to fall in love. They needed you to stay dependent, to crave their validation, to wait for their next move. Because as long as you were reacting, they were winning. But the moment you stop reacting, the moment you become still, quiet, grounded, they start losing control. For someone who thrives on ego, that's unbearable. It's like a puppeteer who's been pulling the strings of a marionette for years. Every movement, every emotion, controlled by them. But one day, without warning, the strings snap. The puppet doesn't move anymore. And the puppeteer, now they're just a person with no one to control, no power, no audience, just empty hands and a bitter realization. They weren't the show, you were. Let's be honest, when you cared, you gave them power, not because you were weak, but because you loved with your whole heart. You showed up, you tried, you forgave things that hurt you. You explained yourself over and over, hoping they'd finally get it. Every time they made you question your worth, you tried harder, you reached further. But now the version of you that needed their validation is gone. Now they can't guilt you, shame you, or bait you back into the cycle. You've detached, and they're spiraling. Here's the part they'll never admit out loud. Losing control over you makes them question who they are. Their status, their identity, their sense of importance was built on your response, your attention, your energy. They felt special knowing you were always there, always reaching, always hoping. But now that you're gone, the mirror's cracked, the illusion's gone. It's not their heart that's broken, it's their pride. They'll throw little tantrums, try to trigger you, act like they don't care. They might even try to replace you quickly, thinking that'll sting. But here's the truth. They're not trying to heal. They're trying to prove they still have it, that they're still in control, that they still matter. But inside, they feel that emptiness because the person who gave them significance, the person who made them feel powerful, has outgrown the game. I know it's hard, my friends. Detaching from someone you cared so deeply for isn't just about cutting contact. It's about cutting the emotional cord. And that takes strength because your heart might still miss them. Your mind might still wonder. You might still hear that whisper, what if they change? What if they come back? What if they finally see my worth? But here's the truth. If they only see your value after they lost control of you, that's not love. That's ego. They don't miss you. They miss the version of themselves that felt powerful when you were in their orbit. Now that you've stepped back, now that you've stopped feeding their pride, they're left with themselves, just themselves, just themselves. For someone who never learned how to face their own reflection, that's terrifying. They'll call it you changing. They'll say you're cold, distant, not the same. But that's the point. You're not the same, because now you see it clearly. And this was never about mutual love or mutual effort. This was about someone feeding their ego at the expense of your peace. And now, that's over. So say this with me. My detachment is their reckoning. Write it in the comments. Show yourself. Show the world. Let them all know you're no longer the puppet. You're no longer giving your energy to someone who only valued control. You've cut the strings, and now you're free. Trust me, my friends. If you think that shook them, stay with me, because what's coming next? That's when they realize the one thing they thought they'd always have has become the one thing they can never get back. Number 6, the ripple effect. When you shift, everything around you shifts. If you are easily provoked, you are easily controlled. They thought you'd fall one push, one dismissive text, one cold shoulder. That's all it used to take. They'd pull back and you'd lean in. They'd go silent and you'd fill the space. They were counting on the chain reaction like a line of dominoes. They thought knocking over one would send you crashing down just like before. But not this time. This time you didn't fall. You didn't chase. You didn't react. You shifted. And in doing so, you changed everything. See, the beauty of a ripple effect is that it starts small, a subtle change, a quiet refusal, a moment of silence instead of explanation. That one shift carries through everything around you. Your silence became a shockwave, your detachment, a quiet earthquake. They didn't hear it coming, they didn't see the cracks form. But now, they're standing in the rubble of the control they once had, trying to figure out when the ground even started shaking. Because when you stop reacting, you start revealing. You show people what they really had, what they lost, what they can no longer access. That's the lesson right there. Control your reactions, and you control your world. They used to press buttons just to see if you'd break, but now those buttons don't work. That silence you're giving them, it's not passive, it's calculated. It's the result of clarity, strength, and knowing your value no longer needs their validation to stand tall. You used to be like a candle in the wind, flickering, trying to stay lit in the middle of chaos. Now you're the mountain, still, solid, unshaken. That shift, that quiet power, that refusal to fall unsettles them more than any argument ever could, because they built the entire dynamic on your response. When they pulled away and you came closer, they felt powerful. When they gave you crumbs and you stayed hungry, they felt needed. When they disappointed you and you kept forgiving, they felt safe in their mess. But now, the rules have changed, and they don't know how to handle it. You stopped playing, you stopped explaining, you stopped proving, and now they're left trying to trigger someone who's untouchable. I know it didn't happen overnight. This version of you, the calm one, the centered one, the version who can walk away without flinching, was built from pain, built from reflection, built from all the moments you gave too much and got so little. But now, you're different. Now you know your energy is sacred. Now you understand that not every battle is worth your peace. Now you've seen what happens when you go quiet, and the world around you starts to adjust. It's wild, right? How people start treating you differently when you stop being available. How the ones who used to ignore you now crave your attention. How the ones who dismissed your feelings now search for your energy. That's the ripple effect. You changed, and now everything around you has to shift too. Yes, they'll test it. They'll poke. They'll produce. They'll try the same old tricks, because they're not just confused, they're afraid. Afraid of the version of you they can no longer manipulate. The version of you who doesn't explain, doesn't break. Because this time, you're not falling like a domino. You're standing like a wall. The best part? You don't have to do anything loud or dramatic to make an impact. Just be still. Just be clear. Just be gone. That's when they feel it the most. So say this with me. I am the shift they never saw coming. Write it in the comments. Show yourself. Show the world. Let it be known this version of you doesn't chase, doesn't explain, and doesn't break under pressure. This version of you doesn't fall in line. It makes the whole line fall apart. Trust me, my friends, if you think that shook the room, stay with me, because what's coming next, that's when the full impact of your silence hits them like an aftershock. Number 7, the test. They will try to lure you back. Stay silent. Sometimes they don't want you back. They just want to know they still have access to you. Here comes the test. You've pulled back. You've gone silent. You've shifted your energy. Just when you start to find your peace again, they show up. Not with a grand apology, not with real accountability, just a breadcrumb. Oh, hey, how have you been? A random emoji, a like on an old photo, a song shared that reminds them of you. It's subtle, it's calculated, it's bait, because here's what you need to understand. They're not coming back because they've changed. They're coming back because you have. The moment they realized you weren't waiting anymore, that you weren't watching their stories, that your energy wasn't orbiting around them anymore, panic set in. But it's not panic rooted in love. It's rooted in ego. It's not I miss them. It's a why don't they need me anymore. It's a who has their attention now. It's a how did I lose control. This isn't a reunion. It's a test, a fisherman casting bait, hoping you'll bite, hoping your old wounds still ache enough to pull you back in. But this time, you know better. Because it's never just a text. It's a hook dressed up in nostalgia, curiosity, and fake interest. Once you bite, the cycle restarts. You know how that goes. round and round in circles, back into confusion, back into overthinking, back into giving everything for nothing. That breadcrumb text, that's not effort. That's manipulation. It's the bare minimum dressed up as progress. It's emotional bait dangled just close enough to your loneliness that they hope you'll reach out again. But not this time. This time, you stay silent, not because you're cold, but because you've grown. You're not punishing them, you're protecting you. Don't be surprised if they turn up the volume. If that one text doesn't work, they'll try something else. A random memory they bring up, a post that seems accidentally directed at you, even a fake apology that sounds just good enough to get your attention, but still avoids real accountability. Because again, they're not sorry. They're scared. Scared that you've finally woken up. Scared that their name no longer has weight. Scared that the game is over and they're not in control anymore. You might replay old memories and convince yourself maybe they're finally seeing my worth. But ask yourself this: why did it take your silence for them to show up? Why didn't they value you when they had access? Why did they wait until your energy disappeared to finally remember your name? That's not love, that's fear. That's ego. That's control slipping through their fingers, and they're scrambling to get it back. They want a reaction, not a relationship. They want reassurance, not reconnection. They want to know they still matter, not because you matter, but because their pride does. This is the moment where most people break, where they reply, where they get sucked back in. But not you, not this time. You've come too far. You've peeled back the curtain. You've seen the game for what it is. You've felt the freedom that comes with detachment. Now, you have a choice. Answer the bait or hold your silence. I promise you, your silence will echo louder than any response ever could. Because what hurts them isn't your anger, it's your indifference. It's realizing they no longer have the same access to you. It's watching you thrive without them and knowing they're no longer part of your story. They'll feel it in their gut, that slow, sick feeling that maybe, just maybe, you're really gone. And that fear, that's their reckoning. So say this with me: their bait no longer tempts me. Write it in the comments. Show yourself, show the world. Let it be known you're no longer responding to low-effort tactics. You've leveled up, you've closed the door, and you're not looking back. Trust me, my friends. If you think this moment was powerful, stay with me, because what comes next, that's when you realize you didn't just ignore the bait. You outgrew the entire ocean. Number 8, the final blow. You moved on, and that's their punishment. When you heal, you don't call them back. You bury the version of yourself that ever needed them. It comes the moment you realize you don't care anymore. Not in a bitter, angry way, not in the "I hope they suffer" kind of way, but in the most powerful way possible. You've outgrown them. You don't hate them. You don't wish them harm. You've simply healed to a point where their name doesn't shake your soul anymore. Their games don't pull you back. Their silence doesn't sting. Because now you have peace, and your peace is their punishment. See, for people like them, losing access to you isn't about losing love. It's about losing power, losing the ability to make you feel something, to keep you stuck, to keep you circling. They fed off your reaction, your pain, your confusion. But when you moved on, when your silence wasn't an act but your reality, that's when it hit. They waited for the storm, the explosion, the emotional breakdown. But instead, they got nothing. You were a storm, my friend, full of fire, lightning, waves, desperate to be seen, to be felt. They stood in it, unmoved, unbothered. But now the storm has passed and all that's left is silence. Their world feels empty, not because you said goodbye, but because you never looked back. That's the blow they never saw coming. Not your anger, not your tears, but your indifference, your peace. The fact that you don't need closure anymore. You gave it to yourself. The version of you that would have died for their attention is gone. Buried, replaced by someone who chooses peace over chaos, self-worth over approval, healing over history. Now they sit in the wreckage of what they destroyed, the texts you don't answer, the stories you don't watch, the love you no longer offer. They feel it. Trust me. So say this with me. My peace is louder than their chaos. Write it in the comments. Show yourself. Show the world. Let them know you didn't just walk away, you rose. That silence, that calm, it's not the absence of pain, it's the presence of power. Now they know you're never coming back. And that, my friends, is the shift that changes everything. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop reacting, you rise. You don't lose them, you free yourself. You become the lesson they never saw coming. If this message hit home, if it reminded you of your power, hit that like button, subscribe for more real talk like this, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And before you go, drop it in the comments. I choose peace over chaos. Say it loud, say it proud. Let them know you're no longer playing small.